Hello, and welcome back to the Compassionate Curiosity Podcast, a space where we explore the messy, beautiful, challenging project of being human. I'm your host, Rachel, a women's wellness coach and yoga and mindfulness teacher at Tranquilo Wellness. And my mission is to help women who feel stuck in cycles of stress, whether that's stress tied to their bodies, burnout, or emotional overwhelm, to find peace again and reclaim self-trust so they can finally feel like themselves again. And here in this space, we dive into the stories we carry about food, movement, our bodies, stress, and self worth, sharing tools, reflections, and lived experience to help you soften the pressure, reconnect with your body, and create more space in your life to breathe, rest, and just be. All guided by curiosity and grounded in compassion. And if you're not already following the show, take a quick second to hit follow so that you never miss a new episode. And I'm so glad to have you here with me today. A quick note before we dive in today. The content of this episode is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional, medical, or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you or someone you love is struggling with an eating disorder or other mental health concern, please reach out to a qualified professional, and you'll find support resources linked in the show notes for that. So that said, I think most of us at some point have faced something really hard or confusing and thought, why did this happen? Whether it's a breakup, burnout, anxiety, or something we never imagined we'd struggle with. That question tends to be humming in the background. I think it's pretty human for us to question that. And when it comes to something like an eating disorder, that question can feel even heavier. Why this? Why me? What made it take hold? Why can't I just be normal? And whether we say it out loud or not, did I do something wrong? If you listen to the myths episode, we began to untangle some of the most common misconceptions of eating disorders and even touched on a few of the underlying factors. But if you still found yourself wondering, okay, but what actually increases the risk of developing an eating disorder? This episode will take you deeper into that question. And whether you've been living with an eating disorder yourself or someone you love has, my hope is that this conversation helps bring more clarity, more context, more compassion to what's often a really misunderstood experience. And so today's episode is about exploring those deeper roots, the less obvious, more human pieces, the ones that don't usually get talked about in casual conversation or flashy headlines. And so we're going to hold the intention today to move through this from a place of curiosity and compassion, as opposed to a place of blame. However, it is okay to sit with blame if that's what comes up for you. A lot of times, allowing ourselves to feel blame and the feelings it might carry with it, like anger, sadness, disappointment, shame, is what we need to do in order for it to move through. So just notice what comes up for you and allow it to be there. Breathe with it. Let it be there. And try not to judge yourself for feeling it. All feelings are valid and all feelings have value. So to be clear, this is not a step-by-step recovery roadmap that actually doesn't exist anyways. But what it is a deeper, more honest conversation about the why your eating disorder might have developed, why certain patterns may have taken root, and why it all makes more sense than you might have realized. And so my hope and intention is that this episode feels more like sitting down with someone who can hold the whole picture and say, there's nothing wrong with you. Let's look at what might have been underneath. And this one's been on my heart for a while because I know for me, wanting to know the why behind my experience with an eating disorder was always at the forefront, something I found myself always coming back to. And for so long, it just was not clear to me why the hell this was part of my experience of life. And because I didn't understand it, I felt so much shame around what I was going through, which, of course, that shame came from so many different places, you know, from a culture that makes it seem like my worth depends on my body, from social dynamics where emotions tend to be minimized or seen as too much, from stigma that frames eating disorders as vain or attention seeking rather than what they truly are, complex coping responses, and from silence, where no one offered language or context for what I was going through. So I assumed it was me. I just had no idea how deep this really went, or that what I was experiencing was actually a surface level expression of much deeper things happening underneath. And honestly, I'm not sure I would have been ready to hear this kind of perspective earlier on. Like, if I even had the capacity to really receive it. Because sometimes, depending on where we are in our healing journey, we're just not in a place to fully receive something, no matter how true or helpful it might be for us in the long run. Maybe I needed to move through the confusion and the disconnection before I could start making sense of it, before I could even begin to understand what was really underneath it all. And that may or may not be the case for you. Everyone's journey is different, and that is okay. But if something in this reflects your experience, if there's a part of you that feels curious or feels that now is the time to tune in, may this episode offer a bit of clarity or resonance for you. And if not, again, that's okay too. Maybe something here just plants a seed for you. Or maybe it's something you come back to whenever it does feel right. That's how things tend to evolve, anyways. That's how a lot of the times insight finds us gradually on its own time. So this isn't something you have to force. Let it meet you where you are right now. And wherever you are right now is okay. Trust that you're exactly where you need to be and that is enough. Just being here, listening, exploring, that is already something. And so before we dive in deeper, as always, I want to invite you to join me in a moment of slowing down, of stillness, of silence, of letting ourselves just be. And so, if you are safe and able to, I invite you to gently close your eyes and just start by taking a deep breath in through your nose. And this time, let it out through your mouth with a heavy sigh, like you're releasing a weight you've been carrying, emptying your lungs completely. And go ahead and do this a few more times at your own pace. And then just let your breath settle into its natural rhythm. And as your breath settles into its natural rhythm, however that is right now, just notice what you sense in your body when you breathe in and when you breathe out. Just noticing and allowing whatever's there to just be there. And if at any time you notice that your mind has wandered, just catch it where it is. Bring some curiosity to its tendency to wander. And then just gently shift your attention back to your breath. And let's take one more deep breath in through the nose. And let out one long sigh through your mouth. And when you're ready, gently opening your eyes and letting the world back in. Thank you so much. Okay, so before we get into the deeper why, like I mentioned earlier, I did do a whole episode specifically focused on common myths around eating disorders. So if you haven't listened to that yet, I definitely encourage you to go back and check it out. But just to ground us here, let's recap a few of those common myths. Things like eating disorders are just about wanting to be skinny. It only happens to thin, white teenage girls. It's a choice. It's just about vanity or being controlling. Or you can tell someone has an eating disorder just by looking at them. These messages, these myths, are everywhere. In media, in casual conversations, even in healthcare settings. And they can really distort the way we understand what's happening here. Not just in others, but in ourselves too. These ideas miss so much of the picture. And so today, we're not just talking about what isn't true. We're exploring underneath the surface what might actually be true. And if you're in the same boat as I was, some of it might really surprise you. But maybe it will offer you what it gave me, which was a sense of clarity that felt validating and affirming. Like things actually started to make sense. Okay, so why does an eating disorder develop then? Well, first of all, it's rarely ever just one single thing. It's usually a combination of factors that create the conditions where an eating disorder can develop. And the thing is that those factors do not cause an eating disorder. What they can do is increase your risk. They can add pressure. They can shape vulnerability. And so why does that distinction matter? Because saying something caused an eating disorder makes it sound like a direct line, like A leads to B. But that's not how this works. Two people can go through the same experience, like dieting, bullying, trauma, and only one might develop an eating disorder. That's because these behaviors emerge from a much more complex mix of factors, like how we cope, how we internalize things, what tools we had access to at the time. So when we say risk factors, we're not pointing fingers. We're just trying to understand what created the conditions where an eating disorder could develop. And what's helped me make sense of that and kind of wrap my head around this is thinking of it like a perfect storm, where a bunch of overlapping factors come together at just the right time, in just the right way, for this particular coping strategy to take root. So let's walk through some of the most commonly recognized risk factors for the development of an eating disorder. And there are 6 groups of risk factors here that we're going to go over. So the first one is genetics and biology. For some people, there's a genetic component. Research has shown that eating disorders can run in families, not just because of behavior modeling, but because of actual biological predisposition. Things like anxiety sensitivity, obsessive tendencies, or even how our brains respond to reward or stress. And these traits don't guarantee an eating disorder, but they can make someone more vulnerable, especially in environments where appearance, achievement, or control are highly valued. So you can think of your biology as the backdrop, and everything you've lived through helps shape the rest of your story. The second group here is temperament and personality. A lot of people who struggle with eating disorders have common traits: high achieving, sensitive, perfectionistic, empathetic, driven, detail oriented. And if you're sitting here like, yes, and yes, please know that first of all, you are not alone in that, and that these traits aren't bad. In fact, they're often what make you capable and thoughtful and successful and deeply caring. But under chronic stress or emotional strain, those same qualities can shift into overdrive. They can turn into ways we try to create control, avoid discomfort, or prove our worth, especially in environments where we've felt unsafe, unseen, or unsure. So these traits often become our armor, helping us feel like we're holding it together when inside things feel like the exact opposite of that. The third group is mental health and emotional coping. Anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, all of these can feed into how an eating disorder develops. Not as causes, again, but as part of a bigger emotional picture. When we don't have access to safe coping tools like self-compassion practices, emotional regulation skills, the ability to name what we're feeling, or body cues awareness, food and body behaviors can start to take their place. They can become ways to self-soothe, numb out, create predictability, self-regulate, or feel a sense of control when everything else feels chaotic. Sometimes they even become a way to express pain that we don't yet have the words for, or to disconnect from pain that feels too overwhelming to face. So we can see in that context that eating disorder behaviors don't just come out of nowhere. They're purposeful responses. They're trying to meet a need, even if they end up causing us harm along the way. The fourth group is culture and environment. We live in a world that is deeply fat phobic, a world where control is praised and thinness is moralized. And if you grew up in a family or culture where emotions weren't really talked about, where you didn't see people express feelings in a safe, healthy way, or where body image was a frequent topic of conversation or criticism, those things can shape how you relate to yourself. When emotions aren't modeled, meaning you didn't see adults acknowledge sadness, talk through anger, regulate stress, it becomes harder to learn how to do those things yourself. And in the absence of that, you might turn to food or the body, not out of vanity or obsession, but because focusing on controlling them felt like the only way to make things feel manageable. It became a way to cope. And even well-meaning caregivers can unintentionally reinforce beliefs about emotions, bodies, worth that leave us feeling like we have to suppress or control ourselves in order to feel okay. And for some of us, that shows up as trying to control food, the body, or how much space we are allowed to take up. The next group is trauma and nervous system dysregulation. So trauma here, and in general, doesn't just mean big dramatic events. It can be chronic emotional invalidation, attachment wounding, bullying, medical trauma, like feeling powerless or shamed in a medical setting, or growing up in an environment where your needs weren't consistently met. All of this can register in the nervous system as danger. And when your nervous system doesn't feel safe, controlling your body or food can become a way to create a sense of safety. It offers the illusion of control in a world that feels too much, too overwhelming, too unpredictable. So, why is it an illusion of control and not actual control? Because even though it feels like you're managing your body, what's actually happening is that your body, and often your pain, is managing you. Controlling food, your weight, or routines might bring a temporary relief, but it's not true agency. It's a reactive coping mechanism, one that operates on the surface level, while the deeper stuff underneath is still there, untouched, waiting to be seen and cared for. So, yes, it can feel like you're in charge or that you're soothing the uncertainty and chaos, but in reality, the behaviors start to control you. The underlying pain isn't actually resolved, and those behaviors often come from fear, not from freedom or connection or clarity. And I can personally attest to all of that because I remember feeling like I had control over what I ate, when I ate, how I ate. But at the same time, when it started to take a stronger hold, it started to feel like there was this force over me. Like I actually had no control at all. Like it was totally controlling me. And it turns out it was. But I didn't know about any of this. I didn't understand the chaos that was happening in my nervous system, or that what I was doing was my best attempt to create safety in a world that felt totally overwhelming. And on top of everything else, there was this extra layer of shame and blame and guilt and you name it, because it felt like it was me. Like there was something wrong with me that I couldn't just get it together or stop or fix it. But what was really happening and what I didn't realize was that my nervous system was doing exactly what it had learned to do, to protect me. It was doing its best to create order in an environment that felt unpredictable. And so food and body focus became the stand-in for emotional regulation, boundaries, a sense of safety. It was trying to find something, anything, to hold on to when everything else felt like too much. So my patterns weren't personal failures, but actually survival strategies. And the last group here of risk factors is dieting and restriction. We cannot ignore how normalized dieting is. It is all around us, sometimes even disguised as healthy eating, clean eating, wellness culture. But beneath the surface, many of these approaches still revolve around restriction, control, and body manipulation. So let's look at what dieting is really. Dieting refers to the intentional restriction of food intake for the purpose of weight loss, weight control, or body alteration, regardless of the label used to describe it. Even when it's framed as health or healthy, if the motivation is tied to fear, control, or the belief that a thinner body is a better body, it can become a slippery slope into disconnection. And that disconnection is key. The moment we start ignoring or suppressing our internal cues, like hunger, fullness, satisfaction, cravings, we begin to override our body's natural rhythms in favor of external rules. That's when our relationship with food often starts to become more rigid, anxious, shame, or fear-based. And the research backs this up. Studies show that dieting is one of the most significant predictors of eating disorder onset, particularly among adolescents and young adults. Like, for example, a 2006 study by Stice et al. Found that adolescent girls who engaged in moderate dieting were 5 times more likely to develop an eating disorder within the next few years. And those who engaged in extreme dieting were 18 times more likely. In this context, extreme dieting refers to behaviors like fasting, skipping meals, using diet pills or laxatives, or severely restricting calorie intake over time. And it's not just about eating disorders. Chronic dieting is also linked to body dissatisfaction, anxiety, binge eating, and metabolic dysregulation, meaning that it can do real harm even when it doesn't develop into a diagnosable eating disorder. And healthy eating can become harmful when food choices are driven by fear, guilt, or strict rules, like labeling foods as good or bad. When this is the case, we're no longer nourishing our bodies. We're disconnecting from them. And in doing so, we lose touch with what our bodies actually need. And so this kind of wellness dieting is especially tricky because it's often praised in our culture, but can be just as disruptive and disconnecting as any other disordered pattern. So, all in all, we see here that no, it's not just one thing that leads to the development of an eating disorder. All of these pieces, genetics, personality traits, trauma, culture, dieting, don't cause an eating disorder on their own. But when some of them overlap, they can create conditions where one is more likely to develop. And if blame is showing up for you here, I get it. I've been there. And like we talked about earlier, I'd invite you to hold that blame gently while also opening the door to compassion. Because what happened makes sense in context. And the more you understand that context, the more space there is for relief, for healing, for reconnection. So if you're holding blame, anger, confusion, or even a sense of loss for the years spent coping in ways that were harmful to you, know that you are not alone. We now know that these behaviors didn't come out of nowhere, right? They were learned. And like all learned patterns, they can be unlearned too, with time and support and love. And that's one of the reasons why understanding the why matters. And there are so many more reasons why the why matters. It brings clarity to what once felt confusing or shameful. It helps us move from reactivity to awareness and from self-blame to self-understanding. Understanding opens the door to more informed, effective healing. It invites more compassion toward ourselves and less judgment. It makes space for a more honest, connected relationship with yourself. And it helps us shift the question from what's wrong with me to what shaped how I learned to cope. So we look at the why, not to dwell in the past, but so we can meet ourselves with more truth, start to understand ourselves more fully, and so that we can start to rebuild trust with our bodies, our emotions, ourselves. And so once we start to see things differently, a new question comes up. How do we live with what we know now, right? When we begin to understand the layers behind our coping patterns, where they came from, how they served us, it can bring up a lot, right? Grief, anger, guilt, relief, disbelief. That's all okay. That's all normal. That is all human. And so the next part of this journey is about integration, not rushing to change or fix things, but about making space to hold your truth in all its messiness and beauty. It's about allowing your story to just be held in your own hands with compassion, to honor what has surfaced and to let it be there. Sometimes that might look like journaling what's coming up for you. It might be sharing your story with someone you trust, or it might just be noticing your patterns with more kindness. These are small but powerful ways to begin integrating what you've uncovered. And if you're not sure how to hold all of it alone, that's okay too. Support, whether through a therapist, a group, or someone you trust, can be such a transformative part of this process. And so you by no means have to carry this all by yourself. And a reminder here that healing doesn't happen all at once. Lord knows that is not true. It unfolds as we build safety and awareness and connection, as we notice old patterns without judgment, as we start to be with ourselves in ways that feel more kind, more aligned, more true, as we keep showing up for ourselves little by little, step by step. So I want to invite you to just pause and take a breath with me here. And let this moment be a reminder to you that you have been coping the best way you knew how, and that you are worthy of love and nourishment and understanding and healing and peace. And so that is where we are going to wrap up today, my dear. And so if anything came up for you during this episode, or if you're walking alongside someone who's struggling, I want you to know that you're not alone. This space is here for you to feel seen, held, heard, human. So know that you can always reach out directly, or you're also welcome to join us inside the Compassionate Curiosity community, which is my free email community for those exploring deeper reflections, insight, and connection around themes like body trust, emotional healing, and self-compassion. And if you're seeking support, whether you're navigating an eating disorder yourself or you're concerned about someone you love, I'm also going to link below in the show notes some helpful resources to explore to support you. And if you're looking for personalized support as you navigate stress, disconnection, or self-doubt, I offer a free Breathe Again breakthrough session, which is a space for you and I to explore what's keeping you stuck and how to move forward with more ease, connection, and peace. And you can book your session using the link in the show notes. And so I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to thank you for your openness and your willingness and strength and beauty. And until next time, may you know that you are not alone. I am here with you. May you be guided by curiosity and grounded in compassion. Sending you love, light, and gratitude today and always.